Hello, everyone, and welcome to Seriously Loco, the Seriously Crazy fan podcast for El Paso Locomotive FC. I am your host, Phil Bakke, and I'm joined, as always, by my co-host, Mika Burrell. Mika, how are we recovering from last night?
Yeah, the games are just, I know it's only been 2 games, but it's felt so chaotic and like jam-packed that it's hard to like process really. So yeah. I think we're gonna process tonight. Actually, it's only been 24 hours since the game at the time of recording, so I'll have a better answer by the end of the episode. How about that?
I think that's totally fair. There is an aspect of this show that is like a little bit of therapy for us. It's a little cathartic, and hopefully it's cathartic for you, the listener, as well, to help work through, and maybe some of our perspective will help you guys work through what you saw and what you thought of this game. I guess to kick things off with some admin, we have had a bunch of stuff go up here to start the season. So we had an episode last week if you wanted to catch up on what we thought about the Sacramento game. And if you wanted a further breakdown of that, you can also head to our Patreon, patreon.com/seriouslyloco. Just take out the vowels in seriously. And that article is now live for everybody. So you can read the tactical takeaways from Sacramento Republic. A similar type article will go up about Colorado Springs here in the next couple of days before we face Detroit City. But yeah, so anyways, we've got a bunch of stuff up. You can find the podcast on any of the major podcast platforms. And if you enjoy the episode and if you're finding us for the first time, if the platform allows you to rate and review, certainly we would really appreciate a rating on there. And yeah, if you're enjoying the podcast, let us know. And you can find us on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, all of the good ones. You can find us there, and you can always interact with the show. We have a whole show's worth of questions tonight from listeners who chimed in either on Twitter or Instagram. And they are guiding kind of how we talk about this game. So always great to hear. And Mika's nice, like saves us some time when it's like, hey, what did people want to focus on?
Absolutely. Yeah. They're doing the heavy lifting, our listeners tonight. So much appreciated. And like Phil said, if you want to get involved, we usually put the call for questions on Instagram, on Twitter usually. And that's where all of them came from tonight. I do have some admin, actually, Phil.
Yeah, go for it.
If you don't mind. Well, today I got a word from Union Omaha, our opponents in the U.S. Open Cup next month, that I will be credentialed to go cover that game in person. So Seriously Loco will be boots on the ground in Omaha, Nebraska next month. I'm really excited. I've never been, and Union Omaha is obviously a very exciting young club already with a championship under their belt in League One, and managed by former Locomotive assistant coach Dom Casciato. So lots of storylines there, and so it'll be interesting to cover it, and hopefully we'll have some content before that to kind of go through all that stuff. But that was just a cool little thing that happened today. So shout out to Union Omaha for being so accommodating and really quick, actually, with their response to my inquiry. It'll be fun.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, specifically shout out to Morgan at Union, who just made the process like extremely easy for Mika.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, it is so cool that like we haven't had a chance even though we are in our 5th season now, we haven't had a lot of chances to hit the road and cover the team on their travels. So I am really looking forward to seeing you out at the match and being able to provide some like perspective on the match day experience too at Union's stadium out there in Omaha.
Yeah, absolutely. And we'll try to. Christian and I have been talking about away days that we think could be on the cards. I mean, Albuquerque, Phoenix, San Antonio's are not like too far. So
sure.
We'll keep going. We'll see what happens.
No, absolutely love it. And yeah, so tons of stuff going on. We're going to continue to bring you guys all of the Locomotive stuff through the highs and unfortunately the lows. And today, Mika, we are covering a low. The Seriously Loco match review. El Paso 1, Colorado Springs 2. In terms of talking about this game overall, I mean, there is really, I mean, it feels like bookends to this match, right? Like, that things started quickly, and in the way that they ended, it was also quite sudden. But in terms of your overall impressions, we did get a question from @DerSchattenwolf on Twitter, who, for those who don't know, the biggest USL fan outside of the US, like by a distance, I would say, coming from Germany. But he asked on Twitter, were the Switchbacks better than expected, or were you, meaning Locomotive, not so good?
I don't want to downplay what the opponents did, because I think what they set out to do they accomplished, much like Sacramento actually.
Sure.
But I lean more towards we were awful for at least a half, and that's not winning football. It's just not when you start as poorly as we did. And I mean it doesn't get much worse than a second-minute goal. I suppose a first-minute, but hey. And then the rest of the half was really just lackluster from Locomotive. I don't think that we made Colorado take it to us in the way that we've seen them do in the past, just the last time that we met, right? So I just think we weren't very good.
It was an unchanged 11 from the loss to Sacramento, which, I mean, for some of the discussion in after training on Tuesday, and especially with what we know now about like fitness and all these some potential injuries and things, it wasn't shocking to see the same 11 start. But in terms of how they did start, I guess, in actually on the field, like, it was a pretty rough go. And unfortunately, like, in this, what can only be described as a shocking first half, because it was such a far cry even from the control of the last game. We looked on the back foot from the very beginning, and in the second minute, this goal that in many ways was similar to the goal that was conceded against Sacramento, it comes down Locomotive's left. Malik Foster has a basically easy kind of dribble move to be able to cut inside, shapes across, and drives it low across the area, isn't dealt with at any point, and Enrique is able to slam home from about 7 yards, and just obviously the worst possible start. But I mean, the nature of the goal too is just like so frustrating in that it was so simple in its construction, and Locomotive didn't really make them work for it.
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially a carbon copy of the goal, the one that that we conceded against Sacramento. The one thing I will say is credit to Jairo Henriquez. I think the finish is a little bit harder. I think the ball is coming at him with much more pace, but you expect a professional to connect to that when he's not being closed down. Mark Navarro kind of stood off him again. It's annoying for sure to see us concede this same kind of goal again. Put the ball out wide, dribble inside, flat ball across the face of goal, and boom, we've conceded. And Nick Hines really just struggled here, slipping and sliding all over the place, trying to defend Malik Foster, and it's just brutal to watch back. And I don't know really what was going on the night. It seemed like our boys were falling down a lot. People had talked about, is the pitch grease, like what's happening? But I don't remember Colorado having that issue, so I just really don't know. Malik Foster gave Nick Hines twisted blood without really so much as dropping a shoulder. I mean, it's not elite dribbling in my estimation. I mean, he does do well to get past him, but it's just Nick kind of falling over himself. And then from there, the chance creation is clear. Enriquez is all alone, just outside the 6-yard area, like you said. So, yeah, brutal, absolutely brutal way to start. Stupid goal to concede. Like, it's just not good enough. It's really not. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And that's what our opponents are going to be looking at from now on. Is this the blueprint to beat El Paso Locomotive?
And that's exactly where I was going. Is like it has just set enough of an example to where once fluke, twice it's starting to exhibit a pattern, and like the reality of conceding that goal in the manner that we did, it not only gets this game off to a terrible start, but it does show that like if you get the ball out wide and can get somebody into a one-on-one, and you've got somebody with decent pace or decent dribbling ability, I think like we almost could make more apologies for the way we conceded the goal against Sacramento, because it was done in a moment of transition. And we talked about how difficult it is, like defending facing your own goal and all this stuff.
Sure.
Foster, in this case, spends enough time like dribbling that actually everybody has time to get set and face get goal side of their marks and all this stuff. And as the ball comes across, it's like somebody cut it out, like can someone stick a boot out and get there?
Yeah.
And it just was, and I think unfortunately kind of the theme of the half for me was that there was no one really taking responsibility in blue for like taking charge of those moments. And that was both with the ball and without, like being authoritative and taking charge of what was happening. We felt passive. Like a lot of stuff that was going on, we just felt passive. We were second to a lot of balls. We weren't really we just weren't competing in the way that we'd expect. And I think to get caught flat-footed on a goal where, I mean, Foster, for all of the skill and for being able to get into the right area to play that cross, he does spend too long. Like, you would expect us to be set and be able to deal with that ball. And just, I think across the half, we just didn't do enough to stamp our authority on the game and really like take charge of situations that we were in. And unfortunately, like with that being the theme of the half, much of it goes by after conceding a second-minute goal. You'd expect to see like that response. You'd expect to see that like, okay, we got punched in the mouth, but we're going to bounce back. We're going to we're at home. Let's get on the front foot. Let's really like make sure that we have a good response. And basically the entire first half occurs where Colorado Springs was quite happy to like try to take some chances from set pieces, really just sit and like try to hit us on the counter because they have the lead on the road. It's what you'd expect. It's what Sacramento did. Like same kind of approach. There wasn't that response. Throughout the first half, there was never really that moment where it's like, okay, like Locomotive are really clicking into gear here. It just, the whole first half basically goes by before there's any sort of response.
Very, very frustrating to watch because we were just moving the ball so slowly. I mean, we were playing like we had played 30 games prior to the start of the night. And I understand, you're coming off a disappointing opening night loss. It's been 2 days. You've really only had like a recovery session, if that. I get it. But that response or lack thereof was not something that is sustainable. Moving the ball way too slow, dallying on the ball in areas that are it's just not good enough. I mean, there's a moment where Eric Calvillo can really just easily slide the ball down the line for Emmanuel Sanupe. It takes 2-3 touches looking around, and he's dispossessed. He doesn't feel the pressure behind him, which actually that comes back later on in our discussion, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But yeah, and not to single out Eric there. That's just one instance. I think actually Emmanuel Sanupe did that too in the second half on the edge of our own area. So just holding on to the ball, taking extra touches when they're unnecessary, the first half just felt very ponderous to me in that way, and not like the response that you would expect at all. Save for maybe the chance. I think Kostishin had a nice chance from outside the area, and he's one of those players that looks like he would want to drag a game by the scruff of the neck, right?
Yeah.
And he certainly tried. I think with that shot from just outside the area, it did force Herrera into a save. And then there's really the only clear-cut chance of the game is in the 39th minute when Josue Aron Gomez is able to head.
Yeah, it came from a corner. Kostishin plays it is a really good ball, like that in-swinging, or out-swinging.
It was out swinging, yeah.
Yeah, sorry, the out-swinging
Kostishin.
corner from Kostishin. And yeah, Gomez, clean contact with the head, but to borrow a term or a joke, I guess, from the Stadio podcast, he almost catches it too well, because he makes this clean contact with it, but it does send it straight down, basically straight down the throat of Herrera in the Switchbacks net. He doesn't know a thing about it. He is standing there and is tall, and his arm just happens to kind of be in the right area, and it just hits his arm. Like, there's really not any there's no goalkeeping going on aside from existing, and unfortunately for Lokomotiv, they're not able to grab that goal, which, to be totally clear, would have been wholly undeserved, but like, it is a really great chance, and the sort of thing that you talk about the good teams when they're on the back foot, when they're not playing well, going into the half equal at 1 would have been the sort of thing that, like, a good team does, like, claw itself into.
Yeah, and this chance is where I start to kind of feel bad that I'm down on the boys right now as we're talking about this first half, because there is an element of luck that we're just not getting.
Yeah.
That, like you said, Herrera knows nothing about that. Like, you can tell how stunned he is when the ball hits him, and his body language tells you as much as well. And so, and on top of that, like Josue Aron Gomez, we talked about how he had a hard night out the other time.
Yeah.
Or, the other night, and it would have just done wonders for him, I think. So there's that aspect of it, that kind of like those margins, right? And margins, I think, come up a lot in this game. It's a game of inches, because there's an alternate reality where we win this game 3-1, where Zacarias' goal, it goes in, Jag's header goes in, and Lucho one-on-one rolls it past it. Like, that's what's so frustrating, is the game could have been easily ours. 3 goals, 3 points.
Yeah.
And we end up losing at home with the last kick of the game, which I'm getting ahead of myself, but it's just like there's things. This sport is ridiculous.
It is, and that's well, I'll talk about it, I guess, as we get towards the end of the game. But we did get a question. I think the thing that doesn't change in any of these universes is the fact that up until the 39th minute, Lokomotiv were terrible,
poor.
Like, and I think it's. We have to be able, it's like, in wins, in losses, like, there's going to be moments where we're living up to what we expect, and there's going to be moments where we're not. And I think everyone in that locker room, from the manager down to like the kit man, is going to be saying, like, that was absolutely not good enough and not up to the standard of what they expect. With that being said, like, through that first half, we did get a question from at J Derek Fox. Derek, a good friend of the pod and former Loco himself, on Twitter. He said, "Notice last night Locos played heavily down the right, especially in the first half. Do we think that was intentional to not push anything Sinupe was nursing? It feels like that tactic limited the team's attacking options and led to a real disappointing first half." So do you think focusing the play down the right so heavily, which it did seem like there was a lot of play going through that right-hand side, do you think that was keeping things from being more dynamic for Lokomotiv?
Yeah, I think I can see where Derek's coming from with his observation. I think there's an inclination to involve Mark Navarro in the play, because he's that big signing. Like, the resume speaks for itself, and he's very good at putting crosses in. But we don't actually have a focal point, so oftentimes, right now anyway, we did see Lucho Solaniak come back. But yeah, I think there's just a tendency to try to get him involved in the play and moving forward because that's his remit, right? He's not come here to be a stalwart at the back. So I just think that that's part of it. On top of that, Kostishin tends to be in that half space as well, and so I think that influences that side of the pitch. But I mean, looking at the left, I've yet to see in 180 minutes, and I know that this is a small sample size, but it's what we've got to work with right now. I don't see any chemistry between Nick Hines and Emmanuel Sinupe.
There are a couple of moments during this game too where Manny is like yelling at Hines like in the run of play about like how close he is or not being close enough, or like there's a lot of like not the sort of like communication you'd love to see between teammates, like trying to build that relationship on the flank. And not to say it's wrong, I just mean like it's a little disjointed.
Absolutely, yeah. And I think I mean, and that's only natural because again, Manny didn't play much last season, and Nick is apparently the starter now. From what we understand, it seems that he's just preferred to Eder Borelli right now. He started at left back a lot in preseason. I don't know about if every game, but certainly a lot is from what we understand. And Borelli's on the bench, not nursing any injury other than maybe lingering shoulder issues that we know about. So something needs to change on that side quick because we can quickly become one-dimensional, like Derek is saying here. And we're not trying to make anything about the fact that they were, bantering on the pitch or whatever. That's normal.
Yeah.
If a team is not yelling at each other, we have a problem, right? Because
especially when things are going as poorly as they were in that first half.
Absolutely. But I think that understanding just needs to come quickly because we can't just keep spamming the right side. It's too predictable. And the left side as well is where we've conceded the goals. So something's got to change there. But yeah, no, I totally see where Derek's coming from with this observation.
Yeah, I think too we got a little bit, there's a certain point, and I think this is a tendency of teams, like when teams are struggling to stitch things together in attack, which I mean that really is what it came down to. It was we were failing to find those kind of link ups, and we did find a handful. Like there were moments where there were some incisive passes being played, but it just never led to that either someone getting in behind or getting into an area to be able to square it or something. And often in those attacks in the first half, we found we would find Navarro out on the right. And I mean, Mark being a creator, having a good cross on him, he often was opting to play the cross in from that like deeper position rather than, I mean, he's not necessarily always going to be trying to get to the byline, all that sort of stuff. But at times, especially when things are when things are not going great in attack, I think it is an easy option to, I'm going to just like play this cross in, kind of put it in the mixer as the English would say. And it's like,
get it launched.
And at a certain point, especially with the personnel we have, it's not to say like we know that Gomez is good in the air, but like those lofted sort of crosses, it almost relies on like, okay, I'm going to get a knockdown and someone's going to run on to this. You're not going to score directly from that cross very often. And so it's not as effective as say like if he's getting 10 yards further up the field and really whipping a cross in, like you can score from that. It's tougher to score from those kind of deeper lofted crosses unless it's leading to some kind of other chance. So to me, it felt like we were sometimes choosing, okay, we're not really stitching things together, so we just gotta like get it up in the box and like hope that something happens, rather than, and again, it just felt passive compared to like, let's really just get the ball down, play it, and try to play through. And I think it led to that first half feeling very kind of like just low threat, low low energy and really just not leading to anything material aside from that one chance from the set piece.
Yeah, and I like to think that Brian's not tweaking his tactics to accommodate someone who's not fit to play. I think Manny
For sure.
is fine. It wasn't serious what happened against Sacramento, and obviously because he starts, but he does come off at halftime, and I think that's more to do with the fact that Brian's trying to manage a 3-game week.
Yeah.
And he's kind of intimated as such in press conferences about how that's extremely difficult of a situation, and I don't know that any other team in USL is really grappling with that many fixtures. I mean, New Mexico United, for one, have not even played yet. So it's just, more USL nonsense.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd like to think it's not to accommodate any, perceived physical weakness on any one side. It's just being one-dimensional, unfortunately.
Yeah. Now, I would say halftime comes, and I tweeted as much that, it was a shocking first half, very poor. But the good news was we're only down 1-0 because it could have been worse. We didn't even talk about the fact that Colorado Springs does have a couple of chances from set pieces. They have a couple of Benny Diaz is called into action a couple of times in the first half to make some saves to keep it 1-0. Second halftime comes, second half right at the start. It was like a new team came out at halftime. The amount of energy, the fight, it was just immediately better. And I think of all of the things about this game that are disappointing and all of the things that are tough to stomach, the one thing that I think we can really put a lot of we can hang our hat on, I guess, as Locomotive fans is this team did come out at halftime and started fighting. Whether or not we didn't get all the rewards of what this maybe response should have gotten, but this team did respond to whatever was said at halftime, and Clearhout does get whatever he needed to get out of that team talk at halftime. It did happen.
Yeah, I mean, without wanting to put words in his mouth, the way that Brian kind of described it was telling the boys to get over themselves, let go of the pressure. You've already conceded in the second minute. Just go out there and play your game and show up, right? Show up for each other and all that kind of thing. And yeah, the second half was much better. Immediately much better.
Yeah.
Much more watchable, that's for sure, because we were zipping the ball around, playing, smashing it into feet, moving the ball quickly, making quicker decisions. And I mean, maybe it tells you something about the focus and maybe the growing into the game that's still occurring because of how early and how late we concede. Maybe there is just an attention span of this team right now, for better or for worse, that hopefully, we hope will improve, but
sure.
In that sweet spot from the whistle at second half to about 80 minutes was great. Yeah. It's what we'd like to see more often. And I mean, talk us through the goal, because that comes real quick.
Yeah. Well, they almost score basically straight out of the half, and I think it was from a corner. Was it from a corner again that we...
Might have been.
Actually, I'm not remembering that chance, so maybe I should just not talk about it. But there was a good chance basically right before where I was yeah, that was another good one. Yeah. And luckily that, Locomotive didn't wait long to create another one. Yeah, this goal, I really love this goal for a number of reasons. The first is Bense. Bense goes on
a journey.
Yeah, he picks the ball up and just keeps running and eating up space. They keep giving him space to run into. He just continues to go.
He sat somebody down on the dribble.
And goes past a man as well. Plays it into the feet of Kostishin, who gets a little bit lucky on the turn, as he tries to, he was looking for something else. I think he's actually trying to create for himself, probably on the edge of the area. Gets a little bit of a lucky deflection off a defender, but it falls straight to Ricardo Zacharias, who takes, and this is not to be whatever to call Ricky out, but he takes like a weird first touch that the ball bounces up on him. And then he just rifles the volley into the, low into the corner, and beats Herrera at the near post, which when he took it, I figured like what's he even aiming for,
Yeah.
at the near post, and just squeeze it in off the post. Very sweet strike from Zacharias, who I think up to that point had like, again, a sort of a tough match, and like stuff was kind of bouncing off of him. He wasn't having like as much luck like getting the ball under control and really like making stuff happen. And I love that he was able to just get that ball, and despite like that weird initial control, like takes an absolutely lovely strike into the bottom left corner, and got Locomotive level.
Well, if it makes you feel better for criticizing the touch, he said it was a bad touch. And he said he kind of laughed because he was like, fortunately, I took a bad touch, or unfortunately, I took a bad touch.
Right.
But then, he's able to control it and rifle home. I think, I'm not too sure because I couldn't get the frame rates just right on YouTube, but it might have been a half volley. I think it maybe takes a little bounce.
Like right.
Yeah.
Just as it hit.
Yeah, which is very hard to do, the half volley. If it indeed was one, someone check me on that. But I think it maybe bounced a little bit. But yeah, great finish. Ball squirts out to him, like you said, Kostishin kind of falling as it's played to him. And once again, like, Kostishin gets his assist, which like I assume there will be many more of those because he's been driving a lot of the good things for this team. And again, 180 minutes, still a small sample size, but he looks like a player that doesn't need any more extrinsic motivation. He gets on the pitch and looks like he just wants to win everything. But yeah, Zacarias, great goal. The Las Cruces native, like, you love to see it. But I think for everything good that we did after this, it just felt like a little naivety creeping in. And I don't know if I'm being too harsh. I think I had said in our group chat, I was like, can we chill around like 80 minutes. I was like, okay, there's a lot of space. Like, I totally have time for the fact that we want to win the game, but we also don't want to lose it.
Yeah, we went hell for leather, and I think like the goal gave confidence. There were certainly moments where it looked like Locomotive would find the winner. None more so than when Lucho Solagnac made his return to the pitch and is immediately basically through on goal, and it's looking like, well, that's game. Like, wrap it up
by the chip ball over the top by Chapa Herrera, another substitute.
Yeah, and a good ball at that. Stays on side, able to get in behind, and it is exactly what you want. Like, if you're Locomotive, there is no player in blue that you would rather want one-on-one with the keeper than Lucho. And again, I'm not going to say that it was lucky because Herrera is quick off his line, does well to like eat up the space, like close down Lucho a little bit. He gets supremely lucky that the ball strikes the outside of his thigh and goes wide, like by a whisker wide. So all that being said, to your point, extremely fine margins, but yeah, the naivety at that point, I mean, it's basically from that chance, things start to get really ragged. Like, Colorado Springs does have a few attacks where they're it's like the warning signs are there.
Yeah.
Of like, hey, we need to get back into shape. We can't just all out attack. They are playing again. They're not just sitting back into shape. They're looking for that chance to hit on the counter too. It got really ragged. I think it's like 84 minutes. There was kind of a warning shot. Yeah. And then 93, Locomotive gets caught fully up the field. Aaron Wheeler was a second half substitute, like a late substitute for Colorado Springs. And if you aren't sure who that is the big hulking dude who came on and just started booting everyone on the field. Like, he's running into people. He did the whole, like, I'm not going to jump for this, and got Bensei, like, carded. Like, there's a whole, like, flurry of things where Wheeler is just making random shit happen and is being allowed to do it. And so when Eric Calvillo was like trying to collect the ball on the edge of Locomotive's, or on the edge of Switchbacks area, Wheeler does just kind of like run into him, sort of kicks him a little bit, but also gets a toe to the ball, is allowed to play. And then it's one pass basically into space for Duke Lacroix, who is being tracked by Chapa, but not closely enough. And Lacroix able on the slide, like it is a good finish in the end, like to be fair to him. And you'd be forgiven for thinking that Lacroix is not a left back based on the composure he showed at 93 minutes to slide that home. But absolute gut punch, because it was, like we said, the warning signs were there. Locomotive are attacking, trying to find the winner, and they're trying to find it so desperately that they end up losing when they had a point in the bag.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so many errors in this sequence. I mean, let's start with not being able to clear the ball, right? And it does fall to Eric Calvillo. I put an open question out there to the Locos Twitter, basically, is like, is this a foul when the Colorado defender, I mean, puts a boot on the ball, but the leg is coming from behind and seems to kind of tag Eric in the ribs, and he goes down. To me, like, I think he has to be stronger there. I do, because he's clearly anticipating the contact. Like, you can see him shape to protect the ball. And I think maybe Eric wanted to call there. I don't know. It just doesn't look great. And then from there, Colorado, to their credit, were, how do I say this? They were just ruthless. Like, the passes were crisp. They were exactly where they needed to go. Especially the last pass. It just like takes like 4 Locomotive players out of the game. By the time they're at midfield, Yuma is there for whatever reason. He stepped completely out of the line when really he should be running back to the far post to maybe clear off the line if a shot comes through. Chapa Herrera, he tries to sprint back with Duke Lacroix. He's sensing the run. He starts to go inside, which is the right thing to do. You want to get goal side. But he loses a step of pace by doing that. And Lacroix is off to the races. Yeah. And then no one is fouling or anything. Like Brian said this. I think Duke Keith asked him in the post match press conference. What is the one thing that you need from your team? Whether that's, that the front office can provide you, that you can do. Like, just in general, he just posed, what do you need? And he said, I need my players to be more mature. And we'll get into that because some people asked about this comment. But I think part of it is this, like, take the card, take the foul, take the man. Yeah.
Go kick him.
Be streetwise.
Yeah.
This is so naive, this kind of goal.
Yeah.
It's so upsetting, especially in the 93rd minute. I mean, just so naive. And I mean, okay, I don't want to like get onto the soapbox or anything, but I watched it in person. It's just brutal. It's brutal when the life is just sucked out of the Southwest University Park and everyone's just like, I came out on a Wednesday night for what exactly? Yeah. But we had this question from our friend of the show at USL Tactics on Twitter, and Phil, he says, is Rose / Pavkovitz / Yuma too mistake prone down the middle for this team to get results?
It's an interesting question. John, obviously, like he has a great thread on this match as well, and some of the bright spots to look for Locomotive too. He's not just doom and gloom either. So certainly check out his threads if you don't already, because he breaks down literally every single match in USL because he's just a maniac. But I think this question is worth asking because and I think painting broadly across like this trio, I do think we talked about Liam Rose in the 6 not highlighting his best qualities. And right now they keep talking in the broadcast, and I don't know if this is a talking point like at all in the press conferences or whatever, but they keep talking on the broadcast about this hybrid six of like Eric and Liam are playing this. They're both sixes and both not. Which I think leads to this sort of stuff, like this question, because I think like we do need to probably pick someone who is supposed to be defensive and someone who is supposed to be more offensive. And I think that needs to be clearly defined. Like, as smart as these, I'm not saying like these players, we need to dumb it down for them or anything like that. I think it's just strictly in moments like this or in these sorts of like organizational sort of conversations. I do think the clarity is needed for the players to understand, if I'm faced with a dilemma in the match, is my first instinct going to be to drop or is my first instinct going to be to go? And like, I think that simply is where Liam right now is like he's caught in between two minds. Like, I don't think he's necessarily doing all of what he needs to do, like to be that cover for the back four, but he's also not like able to impact the match going forward. So it just like, I think he's just like being asked to do more than maybe what we should be asking him to do. As for Pavkovitz Yuma, I think the partnership makes sense in that Pavkovitz is the pace and the proactivity. Yuma is like the cover. Yuma's the like more of a stopper, like rather than a he isn't. I mean, we've even seen like Yuma has transition. He doesn't have the ball at his feet as often as he used to. Like, he doesn't really like carry the ball that much. Like Pavkovitz is that guy. And so I think the partnership makes sense from that perspective. I think the question marks are like, I don't know if it's mistake prone. I guess maybe that last goal is kind of like a good microcosm, like you talking about Yuma getting caught upfield. It is, I think they are forming this partnership, but there is like a level of, I mean, I don't want to say naive because Yuma's obviously extremely experienced player. But there is a level of maybe not always like mentally sticking with the play, like in a way, like
Those are just lapses in concentration.
yeah, those lapses. And it happened last year, like with a totally different center back as a partner, right? Like it happened last year with Yuma and Foxy, which we think extremely highly of Andrew Fox.
Yeah.
Like, so I think unfortunately, like there is a common denominator here in that like Yuma is expected to marshal this backline, and I think he does need to step into that role like more actively, because I do think I think the pieces all make sense in that back three. This is my long story short, TLDR or whatever, is that I think the partnership makes sense because of the qualities of the individual players, but it doesn't make sense in how it's been applied so far, because they aren't like each highlighting their strengths, if that makes sense.
Yes, it does. I think I'm gonna leave Pavkovitz out. I think it's far too early to paint with that broad up brushstroke about being mistake prone. I think he's been very good, decent to good for us so far.
Yeah.
Liam Rose is such a conundrum. I was having this conversation with someone the other day of like, he never really does anything like calamitous, but he's never doing anything like outstanding either. And I feel terrible saying that because it's just like, you're mid. Like, and it's not that at all. It's just that like he gets lost in the game sometimes for me. And it's weird because you look at his numbers and like they're for a central midfielder, they're like pretty outstanding. Like he's always above 90% accuracy in his passes, like just tidy on the ball. And that's kind of like when I profiled him this time last year, like that's what I gathered is like tidy on the ball, don't expect goals and assist contributions, but like metronomic in the midfield.
Yeah.
And so I tend to agree with you that like I don't know that he's necessarily being allowed to given to his instincts of what he should do in trouble. And I think if it were up to me, Eric Calvillo would be the more attacking, like 8, because, and I want to go back to this because I feel like I've kind of been a little critical of Eric on the show tonight, but he has nearly an amazing goal. Could have been in another universe, it's 4-1 because he's got that curler in the 65th minute that just goes wide after a really, really nice team play around Colorado's box. So
that was our best move of the match too.
Absolutely. So if he's doing that while Liam is protecting the back 4, then great, even though you and I have discussed on the podcast that we don't know that Liam's necessarily even a 6 anyway. Yeah. Which then leads me to the conclusion that we've just never replaced Richie Ryan.
So it's funny that you mentioned that, because I think like this does all lead back to, I think this is almost more of a conversation, like talking about Pavkovits and Yuma really is almost more of a conversation of like midfield dysfunction so far, and not dysfunction in the sense that like it can't work, because it totally does. Like you said, like there are moves that are evidence like, okay, this shape like can work, but in terms of functioning like wholly through in 90 minutes, I do think that Eric and Liam are best in a 3.
I agree. And I think we played 4-3-3 with like a cam basically last night.
Yeah, and I mean Kostishin for all intents and purposes like still was so far on the right flank, at least in the first half, that it was still ostensibly like 4-4-2.
Yeah, like a 2, yeah.
Cuz it is still like a double pivot in midfield, and however you slice it, it's like I would love them as 2 of 3 with a 6 behind them. Like I think that would, if Liam is the more like deeper lying of like with a 6, and then Eric is the guy with license to go for it, more of a box to box sort of, however you want to, and able to get into wide areas, like whatever it is, like kind of covering more ground. That to me is like where they shine. We talked about it last year where it's like Liam the 8 is like way better than Liam the 6.
Yeah.
And it's not to say that he's not a good player, because I think we have said like each of these guys are very good. It's just in this 2, I don't think that they're like I was saying, like they're not able to, and thanks for helping me walk to this point, but it's like they're just not able to show their best qualities because they are trying to do the job of like where it almost feels like we're just a guy light for what they should be doing.
And then with Yuma, I mean, I have a lot of sympathy for him because I don't think that we can understate or overstate, I guess I should say, the switch from right-sided center back to left-sided center back. I think that is a big deal. And not to say that Yuma can't do it, because he's very experienced. That's not it at all. And, like you said, he's not really on the ball as much as in previous seasons, so it's not like too bad that he's not left-footed. But that's just a completely different like angle that you have to consider on the game. Yeah. And a new partnership on that other side, too, with Nick Hines, who, again, is stepping into the starting role, so it seems. So I just think that I feel a little bit for Yuma there, and that's kind of a big change. But still, though, the decision-making sometimes is just, like, a bit head-scratching. Like, I don't know. And he will be pissed off about this result more than anyone, to be clear.
Yeah.
I mean... The guy takes his job very, very seriously. Mistake prone seems really like harsh, but like I guess John has a point here about at least early doors, like some of the some of the mistakes are systemic though. So I mean, anyway.
And inability to deal with, I think like the crosses, not cutting out the crosses, that's like you can call both of those mistakes like on the part of the defense. So one of the players that we thought for a time may occupy that number 6 role that we're kind of talking about here, Ander Egelus. Unfortunately, we've gotten some news recently that it seems like he may be missing for an extended period. So Mika, what can you tell us about Anders' condition?
Yeah, it seems that he will be out for some time with a knee injury. It does sound like it is ligament damage. When we asked Brian about it in the post-match press conference, he was still waiting on scans on the MRI and didn't really have a timeline for us. But I think that tells you that it's pretty serious. And we've heard as much that it is serious. And I think that it says a lot that his family was in attendance at the game and he wasn't even in the squad. So
Yeah.
clearly this is something that happened in training. Brian said it was just like a freak thing, just like landed wrong. And it's just really such a shame because, I mean, we're already a small squad, right? And it's a shame for him, obviously, first and foremost. But for the wider like team implications, like the fixtures are coming thick and fast, and not having that option, that quality option, in the depth chart is unfortunate. So just hope that he can get better soon and come back from it. We know it's possible, obviously, Chaparera, but it's just really, really unfortunate for him and heartbreaking, honestly.
Yeah, no, extremely tough, and all our best to Ander as he tries to deal with the inevitably what will likely be surgery and any of the rehab to come. So yeah, just hope for the best for him. Well, Mika, obviously super disappointing loss, but I think we do have a big old virtual bag of listener questions. So I think we'll take a quick break and then dive into those.
Sounds good.
Seriously Loco listener questions. Welcome back. Well, Mika, diving straight into the listener questions. The first came from @TwistedBeto on Twitter. Can you expand on what Clearhout meant by playing mature? Maybe giving examples from watching the games live might help us understand why these mistakes were being made. I mean, Mika, you were in the press conference, so and obviously watched the game live. So you mentioned this quote from Brian earlier in the show, but what can you tell us about him wanting the squad to be more mature?
Yeah, I kind of hinted at it in the first part of the show. Is what I took it to mean is to be more streetwise in dangerous situations and to recognize the danger before you're punished for it, which in this sport is to concede a goal. I took it to mean foul if you need to, take a card if you need to. But also he said he needed his players to make decisions on the ball. And I think that he was speaking to the ponderousness of that first half. And so a maturity in that way of taking the game to the opposition early doors. Like, don't wait for them to punish you first before you respond. I think I took it to mean that maturity in all those senses.
Yeah, it seems like I think there's a maturity level. I think part of the question too is like, I mean, I mentioned it in discussing the first half, but just taking responsibility and
Right.
being willing to be that guy. It just looked like in every situation we were constantly looking for like kind of the easy option, and we weren't no one was willing to just like get a hold of the ball, like get it down. Hey, let's play our game. Hey, let's make sure that like there was a lot of like kind of dicey passes back to Benny from the defenders. There was a lot of like where it's like they're kind of putting their keeper under pressure from a press, rather than like take responsibility to try to break the press with a pass or try to play a ball out into a safer area. It's like, nope, I'm just going to like let Benny deal with this. Like, cause I'm not going to like try to go past this guy or try to like split the press or anything like that. And just simple stuff like that, just having the willingness to take risks and know that you're, why you're doing it, and like taking those calculated risks, or even just people, like you said, just like dallying on the ball and wanting 2-3 touches when Colorado Springs were pressing like hell through that whole first half. Like, you don't have time, and understand that you don't have time. So yeah, I couldn't agree more that I think it has way more to do with just like dealing with the adversity of a match, like nothing crazy, just dealing with the normal sort of like you are playing a game against an opponent that has a say in whether or not you perform well, and like
Right.
approach that from from the aspect of like, hey, we are going to experience up and downs in this match, and we should be able to handle them.
Yeah, absolutely. We had another question this time from Instagram. NG@NGNico on Instagram says he had a more kind of like literal approach to this maturity discussion from Brian. He says, "Are we too young of a squad? Brian spoke about playing more mature. Would a seasoned veteran option midfielder off the bench help?" And this kind of touches on your like Eric and Liam belong in a three talk. What do you think of this question from Instagram?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think we're too young, if that's the question. I do think that there is an element of, we have players who are going through, and I think Eric kind of embodies this, and it's come through in his interviews that he's done, both in preseason and like in media availability after training, after these last couple of games, or in the build up to and after these past couple of games, saying that he is taking on more responsibility as a leader within the team, stepping into that role. And so I do think, while I do think it would be nice to have done more of a passing of the torch with Richie here. I mean, I'll just say like that, with the veteran midfielder here. And I'm sure that he was, working a lot with Eric and like handing off a lot. I mean, Eric wears the number 6 now, which was Richie's number for 4 years. So I think there is like some of that where, Eric is going through this kind of transition, but it does mean that like it really is kind of like Yuma, Eric, and like Aaron, who are like the senior figures on the team who have been around for a while, or for more than a minute. And that does leave a little bit, in terms of like the leadership aspect. It does, you do start to feel like, okay, we have lost a lot of experience and a lot of that cool-headedness that I think, or even just like whatever, Richie being willing to just like get in the referee's face every once in a while and like let him know what he thought of what was going on. And, did that always like swing things our way, whatever, who knows? But I think just having, I don't know that it's that we're too young, but I do think like we are watching players become like go through the hard yards of becoming leaders, which is a difficult transition to go through.
I think that's an absolutely great point. Yeah, is that the age profile of the squad is good in terms of like not being too young, not being too old. We brought the average age down. I think we've, for all of the kind of acrimony of last season, that's something that John Hutchinson did help put in place, is like make the squad younger, spruce it up a little bit. Another option off the bench is always welcome. Again, USL, we always carry small squads. I don't necessarily know that that's like the answer. Like, will this just like completely transform us? No, I think there's just growing pains. Like you just said, Phil, like you put so eloquently. So, perhaps Brian maybe meant that, but at the same time, Brian also signed a 16-year-old and gave him the number 8. So if you're old
hasn't
enough,
made a squad yet.
No, not yet. But I mean,
which
he's
is
got a big
interesting.
boy number. So
yeah, no, for sure.
So I do think he will play a part at some point. I don't know that it's about age per se, but it's absolutely a fair question.
Well, along those lines, we did get a question from at Ramen Cole. Those who know Harry on Twitter. He said this year feels different than last year, which is a positive. If you are the GM, is there one position that needs some improvement? Mika, where would you add to Locomotive if you could only sign a player?
Yeah, Yeah, this is so hard because like for the past 24 hours I've been like, "Oh my god, is our midfield broken?" um but actually I think numbers wise we probably need a secondary scoring option. I don't know, I say that, but then we have Josue Aron Gomez, and when he's firing, and it's absolutely fine, and we don't have to rely on Lucho so much. But like goals
Right.
are it's just so hard to come by for this Locomotive side. And I think if there's someone who's just automatic in the area without much service can make a lot off scraps, which I'm sorry, but that's sometimes how it's going to be, then I think that that is very useful indeed. Because the game is about goals, isn't it? So probably another forward. And then a close second, like a true ball playing six
Yeah.
after that.
Yeah. No, couldn't have said it better. Although I will say now I do think there's probably another shout for depth at fullback, but that's another conversation. Only because I think like when we're making that sub from Mark Navarro to Miles Lyons, and this is nothing against Miles, but I do think like there is.
I mean, it's totally different levels. Like, I think that's fair to say.
You're going from a guy who's played in the Premier League to Miles, who is still growing into his like legs as a
Professional
pro. Like, yeah, like he is still feeling out, like, and really like seeing how he will fit in, to this side. Like, is he just going to be a rotation option this year? Can he like do other stuff for this team? Is he always going to be just the first guy off the bench for Mark? Like, what's the, what's his role? And so I do think there's some like questions at fullback, but yeah, I think first and foremost would just be a really consistent striker that can either supplement Lucho or stand in for Lucho if he's out. And then, yeah, that number 6 area is just something that like you said, I don't think we've replaced Richie Ryan. Tough ask, like, to be able to replace a guy like him. Mm-hmm. There aren't many players in the U.S. who do what he does. There's a reason that Miami FC once paid $750,000 for him. Like, he is a little bit of a unicorn in the American game. So I think, there is a reason that he's been tough to replace, but I think we are currently, as our discussion said, like, I think we're currently kind of drawing on and asking our current midfielders to do the job of someone that we should be identifying who can fulfill that role like more specifically.
For sure. Well, I mean, we always invite people to ask questions, but we love your comments too. So this last one is actually just a comment, but I'll leave it to you, Phil, on how you interpret it, whether you agree or not. But we had one from @PaulB915 on Instagram. He said, just a quick comment. I'm still not worried.
And I think like this is good perspective because it's easy for us to get like caught in the emotion of the game, easy for us to get, especially in the manner in which it played out. I think, like, as you said, there's an alternate universe, and not a strange one to imagine, where Locomotive are comfortable winners of this game despite such a poor first half. They end up losing it, and I even talked about how, like, I tweeted last night after the game that, like, soccer is a funny old game, because if Locomotive had gone into halftime down 2-0 and lost 2-1, I would have said, yep, deserved. We played horrible in the first half and didn't deserve anything out of it. As it happened, I'm sitting there absolutely devastated. Like, we had chances to win and we get sucker punch right at the end, and it's the same exact score line. Same, like, nothing else changed except for the order of the goals and the timing of the goals. And I would have, I went from like, I would have been like, yep, shit night, shit performance, like easy to write off, to now like, yeah, we were unlucky, even though like it wasn't good enough in parts. So there's that. And I think just the response from the team in the game felt like reason to not be too worried, because I think why we worried so early in the first half was there wasn't the response that you'd expect to going behind. So then when they did come out for the second half and there was a response, it's like, okay, like we can kind of like rest easy a little bit, because at least we're not at panic stations of, oh my God, it's 2 games into the season and they already don't give a shit. Like that's crazy. So anyways, like I do think Paul is on the right track here of not overreacting to what are ultimately 2 very narrow losses that on a different day could have gone the other way. This is not us getting like thrashed 4-0 at Oakland. Like that, you know, there are levels, as we say.
Yeah, I think that there is cause for worry, but I also think it's so early that like we have to force ourselves to keep perspective, because I've kind of like raised my voice on this podcast tonight getting upset at what we saw.
Sure.
But, you know, at the end of the day, like it's match week 1, game 2, like we can continue to call out what's wrong while still saying like there's time. Now that gets old, like that grates for sure. We want to see some responses, and we did see one in the second half, but that needs to be far more consistent. We need to start better so that those responses aren't nearly as necessary or as frequent. So yeah, fair enough to Paul for saying that he's still not worried, because I mean, we've seen a lot of things over these past 5 years, so I think that gives you perspective too. And you know, soccer's crazy. Like again, like this could have been 4-1 Locomotive if the wind blows a different way. So you know, not to make excuses, but just to say that this game is a game of inches. It's extremely fine margins, and that's why it's just so frustrating to lose like this. But yeah.
The Seriously Loco match preview. Well, again, as we said on the first episode, Locomotive with an immediate chance to bounce back, and we go again, as they say.
Third time's the charm, please.
Third time's the charm. And this time it is Detroit City FC visiting the SWUP. So Eastern Conference opposition for the first time this season. They did lose on the road 1-0 to San Diego Loyal on the opening night. Mika, I'm not sure if you've had a chance to watch anything back from this game, but
I did, yes.
I think the storyline is Detroit City, relatively quiet offseason compared to obviously the movement of like other teams around them in the East. There was a lot of big, wave making sort of signings made by the likes of Hartford, who signed Antoine Hopino from Detroit City. Lot of noise made by Charleston, the new the new home of former Detroit City manager Ben Pierman. Yeah. So there's a lot of teams making waves, like all these sides of Detroit City. They were relatively quiet. They made a handful of signings in the offseason, very kind of low response in terms of like hype. No one was really thinking that they had a very great offseason. A lot of people thought Loyal had a very good offseason, and in fact, I mean, they didn't have maybe the biggest piece of that offseason in Ronaldo Damas available for this match. But Loyal going in very much highly thought of in the West of how like they are going to be a team to reckon with. Detroit City, low ebb, maybe not even a playoff team in the East, like sort of predictions across the league. And Detroit gave them a really tough game and actually ends up outshooting Loyal in this one.
Yeah, I think they're a little unlucky. Like, I don't know that that Detroit's chances were necessarily like high quality, to be fair. Right. And it was more even, I guess, than you might expect. Given what San Diego Loyal did this offseason, you would think they'd blow a team like this away. But if there's one thing that we know about Detroit, it's, well, two things really. One, they're gonna always be solid. You're not gonna really be blowing Detroit City out.
Yeah.
Really ever. And two, they're usually more than the sum of their parts. So even though we've seen Hopanole leave, we've seen Pato Boteo Faz leave to Las Vegas, Devin
Declan Wynn.
Declan Wynn, Amumensa's coming off a major injury, didn't
Yeah,
start this one.
Yeah.
Like, even without that, they were able to be respectable on the road. And actually, the goal is, there's a lucky bounce for San Diego, and the finish is great. But like,
Yeah.
They weren't like awful by any means. I was impressed with the way San Diego pressed midfield, though. Like, Detroit really could not turn on the ball for anything on the night. And so potentially, like, you could say Loyal deserved the result, but it wasn't a give me by any means. And so Detroit are going to be tough. Like, they're going to be a tough prospect. It's their first time coming to El Paso. I mean, their fans are dedicated enough that there will be some touching down here tomorrow. Like,
for sure.
Like, just expect that.
Yep.
And they are, they're just a very, very solid team. We did draw them at their ground at Keyworth, and so that I think that means something. But it'll be a different prospect tomorrow night, or Saturday night rather. And so when you're looking to like break a losing run, like, Detroit City is not the kind of match that you necessarily want. But who knows? Third time is the charm, maybe.
Yeah, this is I think it'll be a good matchup. I personally, I think it's one of those similar to, we're talking about the injury to Chapa and Chapa coming back from that, and now this injury to Ander. I think similarly with Devin Amumensa, we spoke very highly of him, like, on the show last year in terms of guys in the league who were really making waves, and I do think he's one of the best defenders, like, in USL, bar none.
Yeah.
Seeing him back on the bench, like, is just one of those moments where even as a fan of another team, it's good to see, like, the young talents back healthy, like, and able to contribute. And I am hoping that maybe he needs another week before he's, ready to go fully, because I would love to not have to face him. But yeah, I mean, this Detroit City team, as you said, they are nothing if not highly organized. They have added some pieces. Skage Simonson is like their attacking piece that they really, like, added this offseason. The Norwegian, who was at Loudoun last year, scored a handful of goals for them. And then they play in the same shape. Like, there's really not a lot of variation that they do. They play in like a 3-5-2, 3-4-1-2. Some people describe it, but they play a back three that is very solid. Locomotive legend Matty Lewis returning to the SWUP. Big storyline. I have nothing against Matt Lewis. Obviously, I just like,
it just makes
it's just a funny thing. He spent for those who don't know, Matt Lewis spent the most bizarre, like, 2 months on loan with Locomotive. Did not play a single minute, which was just so strange, given that he's been, like, a solid USL defender. Like, since then, he's come up with Detroit City from Nisa, and along with a lot of guys in the spine of this team. But yeah, they play this 3-5-2, extremely organized. They will create chances on the break. Like, they like a counterattack. And I think in terms of just calling folks out of, like, who are difference makers for them, Maxi Rodriguez was tipped as basically, like, one of the better midfielders in the whole league last year. And that is not to be confused with the Argentine, who is now well retired from the game. Maxi Rodriguez, scorer of one of the biggest bangers. Sorry to the Mexico fans listening to this, but one of the best World Cup goals I've ever seen. But Maxi is just like one of those, like, hardworking, skillful midfielders that I think Locomotive will do well to try to lock him down. And part of why, like, I don't love facing another back three, because this will make three on the bounce that have played like this same sort of three center back setup against us,
Was am I lying, or was this not like a thing last season too, where
where we always
just
played back threes.
where we couldn't figure it out?
Oh, where we were always bad against back threes,
Yeah.
or
Did I
didn't
make
score
that
much.
up?
No, I think that was a theme. I'd have to like look back to be sure, um but
Okay.
yeah, the one yeah, I don't love having to go up against a back three, especially when we're playing, like if we're going to persist with kind of the shape that we have been playing with two up top, you're just kind of naturally outnumbered.
Right.
And if they just all collapse like in the center, then you have to then attack out wide, and it just like forces everything out of the middle, which I don't think we don't need any help doing that. Um, so no, it'll be an interesting matchup. I am excited by the fact that like of the teams in USL, like there are some where the build up to the match and like during the match is going to be more entertaining and more engaging. And I mean, the reality is that like Detroit is chronically online.
Yeah. Chirp and banter at your risk.
Yeah, we
Okay.
do not. We will not like come to anyone's rescue if they wade out
The
into.
counter is to protect the customers,
Yeah.
not the
Yeah, it
staff.
is. Yeah, exactly. It is. So, anyways, it is going to be. I'm sure there'll be plenty of banter. I'm sure there'll be plenty of stuff going on. If there are Detroit fans in attendance, I'm sure Eighth Notch can show them a good time, and hopefully, it's all in good fun. But yeah,
Right.
Detroit chronically online, and if you wade out into that, like that's on you. Um, it's all good. I mean, there are Detroit City supporters that I would say I'm, cordial with. There are there are sections of that fan base that I'm not cordial with. So yeah, it is at your own risk, as Mika said.
It's like they're like the Waffle House of USL Championship fans. Like, don't just whatever. It's up. That's on you. Don't ask for any custom orders. Don't like talk bad about them. Just don't do it.
If you show up, yeah, and if you show up at 2 a.m., like know what you're getting.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like you know why you're here.
Right. No TikTok like secret menu. Nah.
No. So yeah, I do think it'll be an entertaining match. Detroit City, fun note, has stayed on the West Coast and trained in California, rather than travel back to the Midwest
Makes sense.
this week. So they just extended their road trip. They stayed out west, and they'll be traveling to El Paso from California. So maybe taking away some of the effects of what we would expect from some of these like east-west away games, where long travel is gonna like sometimes impact the performance. We know USL teams, like I think, where was it? Was it the Loudoun game? That Locomotive, it took them some stupid amount of time because they like you couldn't take direct flights, so it's like they were connecting like 3 times just to get to Virginia,
Yeah.
and that's why, like, I think in that game in particular, like they didn't look like they turned up until the second half, and then like suddenly everything was fine. But so taking those sort of travel arrangements out of the equation, Detroit City maybe won't look as behind as like some teams coming east to west sometimes do.
Absolutely. Yeah. That was smart on them logistically.
Yeah, I'm sure the club is like happy to not like spring for the extra flight as well, but like
Right. Right.
um well, yeah, it'll be an interesting match. Certainly a fun one. I hope Eighth Notch brings the noise in terms of like atmosphere at the swap, and that it's a nice full full match. Lot of eyeballs on the Detroit City El Paso match last year via being on ESPN. No such love from the worldwide leader this year, but yeah, I'm sure this will garner a lot of attention on Saturday via two really intense and loyal fan bases.
Absolutely. I mean, for the two losses that have been suffered in really bad ways, I'm still looking forward to Saturday just to see what we can do against Eastern Conference opposition. And yeah, maybe it's sort of a free hit in that way, but would love to get some points on the board.
Yeah, and with Detroit City, like the next match is Louisville, so on the road. So we go from
great Dylan Maris.
One, yep, and a reunion with Dylan Maris as well. Yeah, there's just so much narrative. There's a lot of chunks in this narrative stew going on, like we've been saying. So, anyways, yeah. With all that being said, I think we've about reached the end, and like we said at the top of the show, if you've enjoyed it, you can subscribe, follow, whatever the platform allows on your podcast player of choice to Seriously Loco, and drop us a review if you're so moved. And then find us on social media, Twitter, Instagram at Seriously Loco. Yeah, also check out our Patreon. Patreon.com/SeriouslyLoco. It is $2 a month, and you get like early access to all the articles we write, which right now I am doing a series called Tactical Takeaways, so the next one of those will be up tomorrow, ideally. And you'll be able to read it ahead of the match with Detroit on Saturday, breaking down everything that happened in this match against Colorado Springs. But until then, hopefully we'll be on Saturday celebrating a nice locomotive win. But until then, everybody stay loco.